think it was back in February, and I got an email from Jessica saying that she'd written this memoir, and she was interested in presenting it to anyone at the Athenaeum if they were interested. And she sent me a copy of the book, and before I got the book, I went online and looked at the Amazon reviews, and I didn't believe it. I thought it was her friends had written in to support her book. And then I got the book, and it was just one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. It was so honest and heart-wrenching and yet hopeful at the same time. I was very impressed. And I'm so glad that she's here tonight. And please welcome Jessica Aiken-Hall.
Thank you. So I wasn't going to cry, but that almost made me, so thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Umbrella for showing up tonight. They've helped 3 generations of my family escape domestic violence, and they're a really important part of our community. I just think that they're great. And so tonight, I'm donating a portion of my sales to them. And also there are raffle tickets for the basket. They're $1 each, or let's say $5 for 10, and that money will go to Umbrella as well. So my book, like Scott said, talks about the abuse that I went through from childhood into adulthood, different types of abuse, so physical, emotional, and sexual, as well as domestic violence. It goes through the process of all the abuse and the cycle that followed me into adulthood and how I found the courage to break that. After I wrote my memoir, I started to feel like a phony. I figured I finished writing my book, I should be better now. I should be healed. I figured the book was over, my trauma should be over too. And I thought my trauma was gone, I could wash my hands of it and be done. My mission was to move on and not through it. I imagine healing as being a clean process, to say what happened, feel a little bit, and be done. The trauma no longer mattered. It was a race for my life, and I had to move on. I've since learned I was wrong. Before I get into that, though, I'd like to start with a reading. I turned 37 2 weeks ago. That was the age that my dad was when he died. I've been dreading this day or that year for the past 26 years. Something in me just felt like history might repeat itself, so I was just a little anxious about that. So this reading I'm going to read in memory of my father, known as Ralph in the book. A month after graduation was my 18th birthday. Not only was I stepping over the threshold into adulthood, but I was expecting Ralph to walk back into my life. Since his death, I believed Ralph had not died, but was just hiding out to escape his responsibilities. At 10, I wasn't able to comprehend that his departure was forever. I developed an elaborate story that he would return on my 18th birthday. Part of me knew how ridiculous this was, but part of me held on to hope. I began to wonder what I would say to him if I were to forgive him for leaving me. Would feeling his loving arms around me as he wished me, his only child, a happy birthday as I entered into adulthood take away the pain? The night before my birthday, I couldn't sleep. I imagined Ralph walking toward me and smiled as I thought about having him in my life again. I would tell him the truth about Bill and say I was sorry for the lie Mom made me tell. I was nervous he'd be mad, but figured he'd forgive me since he disappeared. We were going to start over. It was almost showtime. The past 7 years of raw emotion were coming to a head. A few more hours and he'll be here. After falling asleep, I awoke to a rainy morning in July with a heart full of hope. I walked into Graham's living room and sat with her as she watched the morning news. I hadn't told anyone about this story. Deep down, I knew it was crazy. The hours passed and Ralph didn't show up. There was no magical knock on the door or no special delivery of flowers from him to let me in on his secret. The afternoon turned to night, and there was still no sign of him. I hung on to anything I could to keep my story going. Maybe he forgot my birthday. Maybe he was too far to get back on time. Maybe he'll come tomorrow. My maybes turned into the reality that he wasn't coming back. He wasn't hiding. He really was dead. My dad died 7 years before, and I hadn't processed the loss. My heart felt empty as the day ended. My 18th birthday was filled with pain. I had lost my father again. Again. How could I do this to myself? Nothing in my life ever went the way I wanted it to. Why did I expect this to be different? Why? My eyes bled tears the rest of the night. My heart was open and raw. A lump in my throat made it hard to breathe. All my hope was lost, and my world turned black. I finally told Graham what I had held on to for all those years. She didn't think I was crazy. She was sad for me. She knew I didn't have the right tools to grieve his loss at the time, and she was sorry I had to lose him all over again. A day I anticipated would be filled with joy was a day forever marked with sadness. I had no choice but to accept his death. I had to learn with the fact that I would spend the rest of my life without a dad. I would get married and not have my dad to walk me down the aisle. I would have kids without a grandfather. I would have to learn how to deal with the things parents teach their daughters to do on my own. I would have to let go of him. I would have to let him travel on this journey. I had only been to his gravesite since his funeral, and when my grandmother had her funeral there. At first, Anne scolding me for standing on him had scared me from ever wanting to go back, and later I convinced myself he wasn't really there anyway. After my birthday, I told Graham and Mark I wanted to go to the cemetery to visit Ralph. We arrived at the cemetery, and it all hit me. This was where my dad was going to spend eternity. This was the only place I could visit him. This was it. Graham and Mark got out of the car with me at first and then gave me some privacy. I talked to him in my head and was very careful not to step on him. My eyes went to the date on the stone. Ralph was there with his dad and his mom. He was their only child, and I was his. I was the missing piece to this family. I was the only one still alive. I looked at the birth years, 1924, 1932, and 1954. I wanted 1981 to be there as well. I needed to be represented somehow. I looked through the change in the car and found a 1981 dime. I placed it on the stone under Ralph's birth year and said my goodbyes. A short while later, I started getting phone calls every night about the same time. I'd answer the phone and the other end of the line was dead. Days went by and the calls kept coming. After a while, the calls became expected. A few weeks later, I returned to visit Ralph. I sat on the ground and looked for the dime. It was gone. I searched the ground around the stone, looked through the grass, still nothing. Where could it have gone? It was unlikely someone had stolen 10 cents from a grave. As I sat on top of the grave, the song I Just Called to Say I Love You started to play in my head. Tears flooded my eyes. It was him. He had been calling me. It all connected. The calls, the dime, the song. I sat there with him and smiled through my tears. He came back to tell me he loved me. He gave me signs he was okay. He was dead, but he was not gone. After that visit, the call stopped. So I mentioned in that piece a lie that I had told, and I was referring to the lie that my mom forced me to tell about the sexual abuse I experienced as a child. She had asked me to blame the abuse on my father, who had passed away, so her husband wouldn't get in trouble. She also said that I'd be protecting my sister had I done that. Excuse me. So this next piece I'll read goes into a little more about how that lie continued to haunt me and our family. When I was 7 months pregnant, Kate was 14 years old. She was dating her boyfriend for a few months, and they were sexually active. She told her boyfriend a secret she carried with her for the past 7 years, and he made her tell Mom. She told Mom Bill had been molesting her since she was 7, the year that I left the home. Kate told Mom all of the horrible, gruesome things he had done to her. They called the police and then me. Mom told me I needed to meet her down at the domestic violence center so they could fill out a restraining order. As I heard the words Mom spoke on the other end of the phone, I was inundated by the mix of emotions. I was sad. I was sad for the things that had happened to Kate and sickened to hear some of the things Bill had done. A rush of guilt washed over me as I thought back to those lies I had told on the witness stand to try to protect Kate. It had backfired. If I hadn't let Mom talk me into it, Kate would have been safe. I was angry with Mom for pushing me into those lies. I was mad at her for protecting Kate, for standing by her side when she hadn't been there for me at all. I was jealous. Kate's father had violated her, but Mom loved her. This was all I wanted. I was torn between rage and sadness. When I arrived at the center, I found Mom and Kate filling out papers in the back room with an advocate. I looked at Kate and yelled through my tears, I told you to never let him touch you. The advocate walked over to me and took me by the shoulder. Kate needs you to be supportive right now. If you can't offer her support, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I shook her hand off me and left the room. Flames of anger shot through my body, and my pulse slammed against my neck. I paced the waiting room as Chuck drank his coffee. The advocate didn't know what I knew. She didn't have her family stolen from her. The more I thought about it, the more anger boiled inside of me. Mom knew. She came out to make sure I was okay. Her eyes looked sad as they met mine. I'm sorry, Jess. If I'd listened to you, this never would have happened. Her head dropped as she slid into the chair next to Chuck. Her body shook as she sobbed. For the first time, I saw Mom as damaged. She understood what it was like to be a failure. We had that in common. Knowing how much Mom hurt dulled some of my anger. I loved her and I didn't want to see her in pain. The police arrested Bill at work. He was released on bail while he waited for trial. Mom fell into a deep depression. She slept away her days as she had done when I was younger and we had lived with Ralph. Kate stayed with her boyfriend's family, leaving Mom alone. I was scared Bill was going to kill her. I offered Mom to stay with Chuck and me, but she refused. When I went to visit her, she was always in bed, dishes of food stacked on the floor around her. When I stood by her bed and talked to her, her head never came out from under the pillow. A darkness encased her now. She had gained weight, and she was close to 400 pounds. With Bill out of the house and losing his income, she was behind in all the bills. In the hours she was awake, she managed to adopt 5 more cats. They filled a void for her, but also left the house smelling of ammonia. They didn't use a litter box, but instead took over the house. Piles of cat feces lined every room, and the floors were wet with urine. Moldy food took over the refrigerator, and piles of laundry grew in the bathroom. The lawn outside turned into a hayfield, and the spiders took up shop on the front porch. The smell from the house seeped outside as the days grew hotter. Mom didn't care about the mess or about anything. The monster that ate my mommy had returned. So that lie caused me a lot of guilt for many, many years. Even after writing my book and going through all the healing that I had done, I still couldn't shake it. In January, I reached out to the Dr. Phil show, and within hours, a producer was on the phone with me, and 7 days later, we were in LA, starting to film for the show. I had reached out to the show hoping that they could offer my sister the help that I felt like I deserved to give her. The process of getting ready for the show and then watching the show was a huge eye-opener for me. I had always looked at the situation that I had been through as not that bad. How could it be that bad? So when we were looking through the photographs and documents to give to the show, my sister found a paper my mom had written for college, going into all the reasons I had mental illness. And reading that paper, it hit me that the abuse I had lived through was actually much worse than I had really imagined. The psychological abuse was intense, and I had kind of not really been aware to that. On the show, my stepfather told the world that I had paranoid schizophrenia and that Dr. Phil needed to save me. So even him saying that in front of me, I still didn't really get it until later, and watching the show kind of as an outsider, I finally got it. So being on the show, it did help a lot. It helped me see things differently. And the show offered to send my sister and I to Onsite, which is an intensive trauma treatment center in Tennessee. It's a week-long program. My wish to help my sister did not happen. She refused to go. But I went, and I do feel like it was helpful. And so it was called Onsite, but the ladies there, we referred to it as trauma camp. So it was 7 days away without outside contact in luxury. And it was a lot of work, though. So it really was intensive therapy. And when I got there, I was still kind of in denial, thinking, how could I be helped? I'm already healed. And I was wrong. I learned at Onsite that everybody who has lived, that is living, has faced trauma. Everybody. If you're alive, you've faced some sort of trauma. I also learned that my whole show of saying it's not that bad, that trauma is not to be measured. It's to be honored and to be owned. So that was a big thing I gained from going there, learning that it's okay to honor what I went through and know that everybody, pretty much everybody that was there, all felt very similar things, that we weren't worthy, we weren't worth being loved or being safe, or the list goes on. But as I just sat back and looked around, I could see how similar everybody really was. Didn't matter what kind of trauma they had been through, it affected us all pretty much the same in a way, or one way or another. And at Onsite, they said they had a kind of a mantra: to heal it, you must feel it. And that said a lot for me, because I figured if I just told it, got it out of me, I didn't have to feel it. It was done. I was done, and I learned that wasn't the case. And also, they said, if you name it, you can tame it, and if you feel it, you can heal it. So that changed kind of my thinking, that this isn't something that I need to say never happened, or it wasn't that bad, but I could own it. And then from there, I could work through what really happened and how it really affected me. So it was a really busy spring, and I didn't expect any of it to happen. I was just really hoping that I could help my sister. I know now it's not my fault. The guilt has been lifted, and through this show, I learned that she felt guilt as well, because even though she was 7, she didn't stand by my side. So we learned that we were both feeling guilt for different reasons, and we had never really talked about that until the show. So a lot of good came out of that, I think. Do you have any questions? Yeah, sure. Yes.
What was the original reason that you decided to write this down? Did you keep journals all along, or was there one thing that made you decide to put this in book form?
I had wanted to write this story my whole life. I didn't know what it was going to look like, or really why I wanted to write it. From the time I could barely write my name, I was making little books and drawing pictures and trying to create a finished product. It was my life dream to write my story. But I kept telling myself, who wants to read this? It's not that bad. Everybody goes through this stuff. And then there was a writing challenge, a November writing challenge, where you write 50,000 words in the month of November, I believe it is. And I can't remember the name of the challenge. And I said, well, I'm just going to do it. And I got 26,000 words in, and I couldn't do it anymore. It was way too painful. I stopped, and I said, my mom is going to have to die before I finish this. It was way too much. I didn't want to hurt her. I knew writing it while she was alive might hurt her. She passed away in April, and I picked back up probably 2 weeks later and sat from May until June and wrote every day, 8 hours a day, until it was finished. So my goal was just to release everything. I was raised to keep secrets, everything. You couldn't tell anybody anything, and this was going to be my release, that I didn't have to keep secrets anymore. And then after it started shaping together, I thought maybe it could help somebody. So that's why it got published, hoping that other people could be helped by what I went through. Yes. Well, they helped as a child when, it talks a little about it in the book. As a child, my dad was very abusive, well, my mom was too, but abusive to my mom, and we went to Umbrella to get help to get out of that situation. And then they helped me in my teen years when I had a boyfriend that was stalking me, so they supported me through that. And then most recently they helped me when I ended my abusive marriage, when I was, and my ex-husband was arrested for domestic violence. They helped support me through that process and helped me get the restraining orders in place and offered support during that process. They did. I don't live in Vermont any longer, but they did offer help. The Victims Advocate program was helpful as well.
Were these men arrested in Vermont?
My ex-husband was, but he didn't go to prison or anything. My stepfather was arrested for what he did to my sister, and that was in Vermont. But those were the only arrests. Yeah. My stepfather has never admitted to what he did to me. Yes.
I followed you too,
Yes.
and can you say anything about the legal structure of the country or various states? I'm curious what kind of civil society legal structure there is. I haven't been able to follow that.
I haven't followed that part of it. No, not that piece. Yeah, just the movement of people sharing their stories, and I mean, the movement's kind of why I wrote the book as well, just to let other people know you're not alone.
I'm asking because I'm curious about what healing means for different people and
Right.
what actually, how a person could encourage a person who is in too much pain, not knowing that it's too much pain, what that really needs. My latest version is that the experience is not representable in a full linguistic form or any representational form, but that gap is extremely vivid.
For my healing, it was a long process, and I went through abuse in my former marriage for many years before I was strong enough to ask for help. I guess growing up in domestic violence, I felt like I deserved it, or it was just how it was supposed to be. And then as I went to grad school, I learned that's not the case. And I got strong enough to see that I deserved safety and love, and my kids deserved that as well. And my kids had kind of been what had kept me there, figuring I didn't want to mess this up, but I really was messing it up. I just didn't know in the moment. So when I got a clear enough head to see what was really happening is when I had the courage to ask for help. And after 10 years of physical abuse in my marriage, I called the police for the first time, twice in 1 week. And the first time the police came, I didn't want them to take him because I was afraid that what the kids would think. The police that night said, if you call us again, we're arresting him. We don't care what you say. And I knew that when I called them. So I called them again, and they arrested him. Yes. Yeah. So that gave me the courage as well, knowing that it didn't have to be my choice, that I didn't have to be the bad guy, so to say. And that started everything, I think, for me. And then I began Reiki Healing, which I feel really helped open me up in many ways to healing, and then couple that with mental health counseling. So together, that's really, I feel, what has helped me come to a place where where I could tell my story and where I could write it all out and begin forgiveness for people. Specifically, my mom was the main person that helped me forgive. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm glad to see you struggling.
Jessica, thank you so much for
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate